everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Wes Hodkiewicz, coming to you once again from our studios here at Lambeau Field. Wes, we're back from Indy. A lot of ground to cover on today's show, quite frankly. We'll start with the preseason game from Saturday in Indianapolis. And whether you're talking about the reserves on offense, the reserves on defense, this game was all about the response because things were not going well for the Packers. The score was 13-0 at one point. But by the end of the day, the scoreboard read 23-19 in favor of Green Bay. And you can talk about whether it was twos versus threes and this and that and the other. But the Packers found out that the guys they have that are going to be filling out this depth chart, they proved they could respond to some adverse circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this was a yeoman's effort on so many levels, right? I mean, it wasn't just it was one big 75-yard touchdown pass or a interception return for a touchdown. It was kind of this all three-phase effort. And I felt like the second half, the beginning of the third quarter, everything kind of switched. We talked after the game, was talking with Israel Abanikanda about this. They have that 14-play drive, and Izzy ended up getting a game ball. He had 11 carries on that drive, and he just kept thinking to himself, I got to get in the end zone. Ben Simmons talks all the time to these running backs. You have to be the tone setters. The Packers needed something to change their momentum. They did it on that drive, and the most impressive thing of all was they started stringing together these longer series without the penalties. And we were chatting with Sean Clifford about this after the game, and he said, that was really the only thing that held us back was not just the penalties, but it was pre-snap penalties. It was those concentration penalties that you don't want to see. Other than that, I actually think the Packers, it was a pretty good accounting for themselves. They had to play a lot of the starters in the first half of the Indianapolis Colts, and they made some plays against them, despite the fact that they obviously, as you mentioned, trailed 13-0 at one point. And then in the second half, to see them pull themselves back into this thing and then have a rather dramatic ending to the game with Teron Hopper getting a PBU on a play that went right down to the wire, and officials had to review it. Teron Herring, excuse me.
Yeah.
Too many.
Yeah.
I got too many names.
I'm
getting past all the Israels right now.
Yeah,
I'm getting the
too many names to keep track of. But yes, Tyron Herring with a heck of a play at the pylon there on the final play of the game. It sure looked like the Colts either were going to have a touchdown or were going to be marked out at the 1-yard line inside the one with a couple seconds left on the clock. But replay showed that the hit that took him to the ground, he wasn't able to maintain possession of the ball. So the game ended there because that was on 4th and 10. We saw Taylor Elgersma direct multiple touchdown drives for the Packers. I thought the young quarterback from Canada acquitted himself pretty well. I mean, a couple of decisions I think he'd like to have back. But considering he only had one series in the first preseason game, and this was really his first extended chance in a preseason game to kind of get into a rhythm, get out there, come to the sideline, go back out, all of those kinds of things that get you into the flow of a game. I thought on balance he performed pretty well. Certainly when the protection was there and he had the conviction on his throw, you could see the arm strength. You could see that this is why the Packers brought this guy in. And then Sean Clifford, whom we've seen in these preseason games over the last couple of years, he ends up taking the ball on the final drive, converts a 4th down by himself, ends up getting the touchdown. Yep. Kind of calling his own number, a little bit of improv there, but makes the sprint to the pylon. So I thought both of the Packers' young quarterbacks, and we don't know how this is going to shake out in terms of who's going to be the number 3, but I thought both of them had something that they could take some pride in from those performances.
I asked Sean after the game, I was like, what did you see on that touchdown run? He's like, I saw holding and I saw a wide open lane to the end zone. Because he was actually, as I wrote in our notes package, he was looking at Cornelius Johnson. That was the read that he had, but he kind of got held up in the end zone. So as it turned out, there ended up being 11 yards in front of him and nothing but pay dirt there. So he took it himself. He called his own number, and then the Packers were able to hold on for the victory. But yeah, I just felt like that competition at the cornerback position, this is where it always starts to get a little bit more spotlight on it, right? And for Elgersma to be able to get the work that he did, I mean, he ended up going, 3 or 4 series. He was obviously the one that started getting that kick started with this Packers comeback. The thing I like about it, Matt LaFleur said at his press conference on Sunday, you do need to be smart. He took some contact. He made some tough throws there at times that could have potentially put the ball at danger. But I honestly believe that's what you want to see from a guy competing for the third quarterback spot. You want to see them trying to go out there and make plays. And I felt like he did that. And more than anything, his arm talent from the day that we saw him at the rookie minicamp on tryout, he could throw a football. In one story I didn't know, I obviously didn't understand, but I didn't know until Matt Schneidman brought it up during the press conference with the assistant coaches on Sunday, was that Packers pass game coordinator Jason Vrabel actually coached him when Eldrisma was invited to go to the Senior Bowl.
Senior Bowl down in Mobile, yeah.
In January.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So I guess if I would have just looked at a roster, I would have figured that out. But be that as it may, I just felt like there were a lot of young guys that really stepped up and competed. Julian Hicks had a beautiful catch. I believe that one was from Eldrisma down the sideline, but it got wiped out by a holding penalty.
Might have been from Willis, actually.
Was it actually
It might have been earlier
Okay.
in the game when Malik Willis was in there. When there was a stretch there where the Packers, essentially the number 2 offense was going against the starting defense for the Colts. And same thing, as you mentioned before, with the Colts starting offenses. They're trying to sort out Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson at quarterback. Their starters were going against the Packers reserves on defense. And I thought, you're not expecting, domination, but I don't think the Colts starters dominated the Packers.
Yep.
I thought the Packers reserve units did well there, and of course, probably the epitome of the respond to adversity, the bounce back type of nature of this game was embodied in the rookie second-round draft pick Anthony Belton at right tackle. He ends up getting called for 5 penalties, a variety of different things. There was a personal foul on the sideline. There were a couple of alignment issues when the Packers were driving to try to score at the end of the first half, and a couple other things in between. And he went back out there. The coaches put him back out there in the second half. They said, all right, young man, let's clean it up. Let's get things going. And to Belton's credit, he went out there and suddenly his game was cleaned up. The entire offense, quite frankly, as you mentioned, the penalties were reduced. And I give Anthony Belton a lot of credit because that's a moment for a rookie in a preseason game. Guys can shrink from that. Yep. And he absolutely did not. He was put back out there. He took charge of the situation, and then he performed the way the Packers coaches expect him to perform. And I tip my hat to the young man.
And I tip my hat to the Packers coaching staff. They didn't just let him go through that first half and say, all right, we're going to switch things up. We're going to go a different direction.
Right.
They let him work through it. And, it was obviously a low point when you go back-to-back plays with illegal formation. As Matt LaFleur had talked about, that is somewhat on not just Belton. That's on the offensive line because Belton's lining up to where the foot is of his right guard next to him. The quarterback has to make sure you're right there as well. There was multiple people in play, but at the end of the day, I felt like, and I wrote this in Insider Inbox, we learned a little bit about the man in Anthony Belton beyond just the prospect as a tackle. And in the second half, I thought he played exceptionally well. That Amar Johnson run was all Belton and the offensive line, just second effort, just pushing their running back into the end zone. Johnson trying to keep his feet moving and seeing if he can make something happen. And again, I felt like when you're looking at a young football player, a second-round pick, but yet still a guy that is 4 months into his NFL career here, there's going to be adversity. And I felt like Belton met that adversity in the first half and found a way to respond to it in the second.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there were some more injuries to come out of the game in Indianapolis. At the top of the list, second-year running back Marshawn Lloyd, the third-round draft pick from USC a year earlier. He finally gets back into action. He makes a great play, a great catch on a wheel route down the sideline, but takes a hit and puts his leg in an awkward position, and he's out once again with a hamstring injury. Extremely unfortunate there. I'll just run through a few others quickly, and we'll get back to Lloyd. Barron Sorrell, the rookie fourth-round draft pick, he sustained a knee injury. I believe it was on special teams, if I'm not mistaken. Sounds like he's going to be out for a little bit. The young safety Omar Brown, who was the star of Family Night, he ended up having to spend some extra time in Indianapolis over the weekend. Did not come back with the team because of a chest or lung injury, and he needed to go to the hospital. So hopefully everything with Brown is okay. But getting back to Lloyd, look, I know the fans are frustrated. I'll just say this. If you're frustrated as a fan because of everything that's happened with Marshawn Lloyd and he hasn't been able to stay healthy and hasn't been able to be on the practice field and in the games as frequently as everybody would like, just try to imagine how frustrating this is for him, because this is a player with a ton of promise and he does everything right. And for some reason, his body is just betraying him at strange moments, and it isn't. Believe me, if there were other things that could be done, the Packers and Lloyd would be doing it. And I think you just have to chalk this up to some really, really bad luck, and you hope the young man can get through it and come out the other side. As Ben Sermon said when he spoke to the media on Sunday, this is about supporting him. This isn't about getting down on him because, oh, geez, he's hurt again. This is about supporting him and trying to get him through it and get him to the other side, because the Packers feel like there is a player who can help this team in that unfortunately troubled physical body right now.
Yeah, this isn't West showing up for work and be like, I don't feel like doing this today.
Right.
I mean, you got scans, you have CAT scans, all this that show you that what his body's going through, the soft tissue injuries that he's been weathering, going back to his time at Madison in January, going down there to try to find out more about his body and what he can do to align himself properly. I think the toughest thing for me with Lloyd, and again, another thing I touched on in Insider Inbox, this is a young man that has done everything right in the standpoint of trying to get his body right, but then also the way he's handled this. He's been accountable. He hasn't run away from this. In the locker room, when guys come and talk to him, whether it's him not being able to practice or whether it's him coming back, he always has this infectious enthusiasm about the game of football. And listen to him last week before the game talk about how he just wants to play again. It had been almost a year since the last Colts game, and he considers it back to college. It's the last time he's really truly played in a game. And then unfortunately this happens, and unfortunately it also happens on a play in which he really shows his potential as a pass catcher. That 33-yard wheel route was one of the plays of the game, one of the highlights of the game, and unfortunately at the tail end of it he gets banged up. The one thing I'll mention too, Brian Gutekunst was kind of asked about him in a backdoor kind of way about the injuries he's weathering. He used, Mike Flanagan as an example. To be honest with you, this kind of reminds me of the James Stark situation when he first got to Green Bay, where he obviously missed most of his rookie year. He comes back for the playoff game. He had to weather some soft tissue injuries and some knee injuries early on, but then ultimately ended up becoming a pretty stable piece for Green Bay. You hope that that's where Lloyd can get to, but obviously right now we're back in a holding pattern and seeing when number 32 can get on the field.
Yeah, I actually like that comparison with Starks. Obviously Starks' rookie year ended in very different fashion than Marshawn Lloyd's did. You wonder, and I just say obviously everything is hypothetical, you wonder where Marshawn Lloyd's rookie year goes if not for suddenly the appendicitis.
The appendectomy.
Right? I mean, this was not even something that was football related, something that can happen to anybody in their life at any time, and it just so happened with him when he was right about to get back on the field last season. He gets the appendicitis, has to have the appendectomy, and then of course you just need the recovery time because you can't send your body out there to get pounded by all these defensive tacklers.
Yeah, it's like having core muscle surgery.
Exactly. So anyway, our fingers are crossed for Lloyd, and hopefully at some point here he gets through all of this.
Before we move on, just going to give a hat tip to Omar Brown too. Matt LaFleur mentioned that injury, the lung contusion, everything that happened, that actually happened earlier in the game. The guy stayed on the field. I think it was it through the beginning of the third quarter, then finally had to pull himself out. Yeah,
LaFleur said he played about 12 more minutes of game action before he took himself out.
That's toughness, dude.
Yeah, and you want to know just how badly these guys want to perform and to make the team when you're fighting for a roster spot in this league. I mean, that was Exhibit A right there. A couple other things to get to with regard to Monday's practice after we got back to Green Bay. But first, we'll hear this word from our sponsors. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. At Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. Pit Boss Grills, the official grill of Packers tailgating at Lambeau or at your house. Take your game day to the next level with a Pit Boss wood pellet grill. Pit Boss grills available at Menards. Welcome back to Packers Unscripted. Wes, the Packers got back on the practice field on Monday. It was a practice that was closed to the public but open to the media. We did find out about a few more injuries. We don't necessarily know the severity on these, but Lucas Van Ness, Kenny Clark, and Aaron Banks were all resting during Monday's practice because of back issues. Jacob Monk, the young offensive lineman, second-year player, he has a hamstring issue. So we'll see what happens going through the rest of this week with a full pads practice on Tuesday and then obviously the joint practice with the Seahawks coming up on Thursday. But the bigger news from Monday's practice is that quarterback Jordan Love was back at practice, and Matt LaFleur and the coaches, they modified things to incorporate a couple of 7-on-7 periods, which is not something that Matt LaFleur likes. He doesn't like that drill. He doesn't feel it's realistic. But the 7-on-7, where essentially it's just the quarterback with the receivers against the linebackers and DBs, so there aren't any linemen out there, it was really the only way for Jordan Love to sort of make some live throwing reps, but without putting his left hand in any kind of harm's way, so to speak. There wasn't going to be any chance that it would hit on a helmet of a lineman or there'd be any contact with the left hand. And the way Love conducted the practice with taking the ball off of a stool for like a regular snap and just holding it in his hand, in his right hand for a shotgun snap, it was all about basically him going through the practice as though he didn't even have a left hand. Right. I believe he ended up with 12 reps, 12 throws in each of the 7-on-7 periods. So we'll see what happens from here again the rest of this week and then heading into next week as the Packers then start ramping things up for the regular season. But it was awfully good to see Jordan Love back on the practice.
Yeah, and for them to be able to find a way to incorporate him, you have your franchise quarterback, one of your superstars of your team. You don't want him just standing on the sideline, just waiting for this ligament to heal back up. You want to try to incorporate him if there's a way to incorporate him. I felt like the 7-on-7 accomplished that. I think one thing Matt LaFleur did too that was a good adjustment was they prioritized the red zone at the end of practice as well. That probably is where it gets a little bit more realistic because now you're condensing the secondary. Yeah. Yes, you're not throwing over offensive linemen. Yes, you don't have a rush in your face, but it does make the quarterback make some of those decisions he's going to have to make rather than just trying to do a go ball or something during the regular midfield practice. So, and in that period, I felt like Love made one of the plays of the day. I mean, he had showed remarkable touch on that corner route to Matthew Golden.
Yeah, it was
kudos
nice
to
throw.
Golden. I mean, this practice, man, it poured midway through practice. It was poor, Malik Willis and Taylor Eldrisma and also Sean Clifford, they had to go through the 11-on-11 when it was just a monsoon out there. And while it lightened up, it still was very wet. I was talking.
Yeah, it was still a steady rain throughout the whole practice.
I was talking to Evan Williams at the end of it, who was one of the corners or one of the safeties that was defending on the Golden touchdown. And he actually ended practice with an interception. He's like, yeah, it was slipping through my gloves with how much water there was. Fortunately, I was able to corral it against my body, and he made a nice play. But they had to adjust to it, and they did. So, but for Love to be able to get out there in any capacity, again, as you mentioned, the shotgun snaps, he's starting with the ball already in his throwing hand. When they were working under center, he was doing the stuff off the stool. And, the Packers made it work. This was the practice where they kind of had to get some work in with Jordan Love because we don't know, one, what it's going to look like at Tuesday's practice, which is going to be more of a traditional public practice. And then obviously Thursday, you're not going to do those type of drills against the Seahawks. So They got in the work that they could with the practice that they were allotted.
It was kind of funny. I thought it was interesting. A couple times watching Love, you could tell he had to resist the habit that he has of patting the ball with his left hand. He had to keep his left hand away, as he's making the reads and adjusting his feet and whatnot. And it was like no, that left hand is not supposed to touch anything. Like
there's only 20 years of habits there.
Yeah, exactly. leave it alone. Old habits die hard. But he did everything he could to protect that surgically repaired thumb. So one other thing to touch on with regard to Monday's practice is we saw Rasheed Walker is ramping up here, getting back to what you would consider, I guess, full go or full speed, full complement of reps, and everything we've been told now. Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan, this is a full-fledged competition for the starting left tackle spot on the offensive line. Now, in Monday's practice, Walker was taking all the reps at left tackle, and Morgan was taking the reps with the number one offensive line at left guard because Aaron Banks was sitting out with the back issue. So, but this left tackle competition is going to go all the way to the end. And for all we know, it may not even be decided at the end because maybe ultimately, if everybody else is healthy, they'll choose to rotate the guys for a while and then see during games who ends up winning it. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but based on recent history, it's certainly a possibility here. The challenger is Jordan Morgan. The incumbent is Rasheed Walker. And everything that we've seen and heard from these players, they're both taking the right approach to it. Their teammates, nobody's taking anything for granted. There isn't any ill will about it. The coaches are just letting them go at it and see who emerges as the best guy.
Yeah, this is an incredible situation for the Packers to be in. I mean, Rasheed Walker can be starting for so many teams at left tackle in this league with what he's put on tape over the last 2 years. So
35 starts, including playoffs at left tackle.
Yeah, just to be able to do that now and be able to get this type of work in, and certainly hoping to put this groin injury behind him. I find it a bit quizzical, to be honest with you, and I understand why these narratives get driven. But it was funny to me where we were even sitting there on Saturday trying to figure out, okay, well, if Walker plays, how are they going to divide up the snaps? Well, then you go into Monday's practice and Aaron Banks isn't available. So I think this, again, speaks to the type of flexibility they're going to have, not only with Morgan, but also Sean Ryan potentially this season, a guy that can play the three interior spots. That's how this game is played. And you never know who you're going to have. You never know when someone might be unavailable, and you have to be able to adapt to it. That be in a position where Walker is there and Morgan is playing as well as he has so far, it puts Green Bay in a good spot there with that number 6 swing tackle or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, that, as I've said before, this number 6 guy on the offensive line could go any number of ways. It could end up being Rasheed Walker, and if a guy who started 35 games at left tackle is your number 6 guy, that's not a bad spot to be in. It could be Jordan Morgan, and if your number 6 guy is a first-round draft pick, that's not a bad spot to be in. Or it could be Sean Ryan, a guy who has started a good, full season's worth plus at right guard, but has also shown that he can play center and whatnot. If that's your number 6 guy, the way this shakes out, that's a pretty good spot to be in as well. So we don't know exactly how this is going to go, but I think the Packers feel pretty good about it as long as they can keep all their main guys healthy.
You wrote a really nice story on Walker, and kudos to you for that, but I got to give him credit for the soundbite of the locker room on Monday, and also maybe of training camp when we were reflecting on all the issues and how difficult the first half was for young Anthony Belton. Walker said he was eating a clementine. I think it was at halftime or it was on the sideline or something like that.
I think it was at halftime.
And he's just, hey, what do you say to a guy that just got 5 penalties? Eat a clementine.
And he's getting yelled at by everybody, by the coaches and everybody else. And he says, I just threw him a snack. I just said, hey, eat this clementine, take a deep breath, like it'll all be good. And he's like, he ate the clementine and he had a good second half.
It doesn't do it justice. You got to go to Packers.com or you got to go to Twitter. You got to see the video of it because the way that Rasheed tells the story, it just brought a smile to my face. Yeah, it was a good lighthearted moment amidst the calamity of training camp.
Totally agree. And with that, we're going to call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to continue to follow all of our coverage of the team. This final week of training camp here, we'll have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.